On the morning of May 27, 1942, a black Mercedes convertible slowed to navigate a sharp curve on a street in Prague, carrying one of the most powerful and feared men in the entire Nazi regime, a senior SS official whom Adolf Hitler himself had once described as the man with the iron heart. Waiting at that curve were two young men, a Czech and a Slovak, both trained paratroopers who had spent months preparing for this single moment, armed with a modified submachine gun and a briefcase containing a specially adapted anti-tank grenade. What followed would result in the death of one of the chief architects of the Holocaust, one of the only successful assassinations of a top-ranking Nazi official during the entire war, and would trigger a wave of German retaliation so brutal that it would erase two entire villages from the map and claim the lives of thousands of innocent civilians who had absolutely nothing to do with the operation itself. This is the true story of Operation Anthropoid, the mission to kill Reinhard Heydrich, and the devastating price paid in its aftermath.
To understand why this mission was considered important enough to justify the enormous risk it carried, both to the operatives involved and, as it would tragically prove, to the broader Czech civilian population, it helps to understand exactly who Reinhard Heydrich was and the position he held within the Nazi regime by 1942.
Heydrich stood among the most powerful and feared officials in the entire Third Reich, holding senior positions within the SS security apparatus and serving since 1941 as the Reich protector of Bohemia and Moravia, the German-occupied Czech territories, a position that gave him direct administrative control over the occupied Czech population. Heydrich's reputation within the Nazi hierarchy rested on a genuinely chilling combination of organizational efficiency and ideological fanaticism. He had played a central direct role in planning the systematic mass murder of European Jews, chairing the January 1942 Wannsee Conference, at which senior Nazi officials formally coordinated the logistics of what would become the systematic extermination later known as the Holocaust. Beyond this central role in planning genocide, Heydrich had also overseen the SS security services responsible for suppressing resistance movements across occupied Europe, and his administration of the occupied Czech territories following his 1941 appointment had been marked by a deliberate campaign of brutal repression specifically intended to crush any remaining Czech resistance activity through a combination of terror, mass arrests, and executions. Czech government officials operating in exile in London, working alongside the Czechoslovakian resistance movement still operating within the occupied homeland, came to view Heydrich's brutal, effective administration as representing a genuinely serious threat to the continued survival of any meaningful Czech resistance capability, while also recognizing that his death would represent both a significant practical blow to German administrative control over the occupied territories and a powerful symbolic demonstration that Czech, despite German occupation, remained an active participant in the broader Allied war effort, a consideration that carried genuine diplomatic significance given ongoing discussions among Allied governments regarding the post-war political future of Czechoslovakia, and the degree to which its government in exile would be recognized as a legitimate, active partner in the Allied cause. The mission to assassinate Heydrich, codenamed Operation Anthropoid, was planned and organized primarily by Czechoslovak military intelligence operating from London, working in coordination with British Special Operations executive resources that provided training, equipment, and the actual means of transporting operatives back into occupied Czechoslovakia. Two operatives were selected to carry out the actual assassination itself: Josef Gabčík, a Slovak soldier, and Jan Kubiš, a Czech soldier, both of whom had escaped occupied Czechoslovakia earlier in the war and subsequently volunteered for the extraordinarily dangerous specialized training that preparing for a mission of this nature would require. Gabčík and Kubiš underwent extensive training in Britain covering the specific skills their mission would require, including weapons handling, explosives, and the broader clandestine tradecraft necessary for operating undetected within occupied territory, before being parachuted back into Czechoslovakia in December 1941, beginning a period of several months during which they would need to make contact with a domestic Czech resistance network, gather detailed intelligence regarding Heydrich's daily movements and security arrangements and identify a specific location and method by which the assassination might actually be carried out with a realistic chance of success.
This preparatory period proved genuinely difficult and dangerous in its own right, requiring the two operatives to survive for months within occupied territory under conditions of extreme risk, relying on a network of Czech resistance sympathizers willing to provide shelter, false documentation, and logistical support, despite the severe, often lethal consequences German occupation authorities imposed on any Czech civilians discovered assisting resistance activity.
Through this resistance network, Gabčík and Kubiš gradually developed detailed intelligence regarding Heydrich's daily commute between his official residence and his administrative offices in Prague, eventually identifying a specific curve in the road along his regular commute route where his vehicle would be forced to slow considerably, providing the operatives with what they judged to be their best realistic opportunity to carry out the assassination.
On the morning of May 27, 1942, Gabčík and Kubiš, along with several additional resistance members providing support and lookout functions, positioned themselves at this carefully selected location, waiting for Heydrich's vehicle to approach along its regular commute route. As the vehicle slowed to navigate the curve as anticipated, Gabčík stepped forward and attempted to open fire on Heydrich directly using a modified Lidice submachine gun, only to have the weapon jam at the critical moment. A genuinely catastrophic mechanical failure that under almost any other circumstances would likely have resulted in the complete failure of the entire mission and the near-certain capture or death of the operatives involved, given that Heydrich's vehicle had now stopped directly in front of them, with Heydrich himself, according to multiple accounts, drawing his own weapon and ordering his driver to stop, rather than continuing to flee the scene, apparently intending to personally confront and shoot his would-be assassin. It was at this critical moment that Kubiš, positioned nearby, threw the specially adapted anti-tank grenade the operation had specifically prepared for exactly this contingency, a weapon selected precisely because its explosive power offered a realistic chance of inflicting fatal injury even if the primary firearm attack failed or proved insufficient. The grenade detonated near the vehicle, and while it did not kill Heydrich immediately, the explosion inflicted severe injuries, driving fragments of the car's damaged upholstery and metal debris into Heydrich's body, causing significant internal injuries that, while not immediately fatal, would ultimately prove fatal in the days that followed. In the immediate aftermath of the attack, Gabčík and Kubiš, along with their support team, successfully fled the scene, despite Heydrich's own initial attempt to pursue and personally confront them before his injuries forced him to abandon this effort, and the operatives subsequently made their way to a series of safe houses arranged by the Czech resistance network, eventually taking refuge within the crypt of the Orthodox Cathedral of Saints Cyril and Methodius in central Prague, a location that would become the site of the operation's final, devastating chapter in the weeks that followed. Heydrich, despite receiving what appeared to be reasonably competent initial medical treatment following the attack, developed a severe infection from his wounds in the days that followed, ultimately succumbing to these complications and dying on June 4, 1942, roughly a week after the initial attack. News that was met with genuine celebration among Czech resistance networks and allied governments, who recognized the assassination as a significant symbolic and practical victory, while simultaneously bracing for what virtually everyone involved understood would likely be a severe, brutal German retaliatory response. That retaliation, when it came, proved to be even more devastating and disproportionate than most had anticipated. German occupation authorities, under direct orders reflecting Hitler's own personal fury at the assassination of one of his most trusted and valued senior officials, launched an immediate, massive campaign of retaliation across the occupied Czech territories, involving mass arrests, interrogations, and executions of anyone even remotely suspected of connection to the resistance movement or the assassination itself. The most infamous and devastating single act of this retaliatory campaign occurred in the small Czech village of Lidice, a community that German investigators had, based on fragmentary and, as subsequent historical investigation would establish, largely inaccurate intelligence, come to suspect of having some connection to the resistance network that had supported the assassination operation. On June 10, 1942, German security forces surrounded the village of Lidice, and proceeded to carry out one of the most horrifying acts of collective civilian punishment of the entire war, executing the village's entire adult male population, deporting the women to concentration camps, and forcibly separating the village's children from their families, sending the majority of these children to their deaths, while a small number, judged by German racial officials to possess characteristics suitable for what the Nazi regime termed Germanization, were forcibly placed with German families under new identities, permanently severed from their original families and Czech identity.
The village itself was then completely razed, its buildings destroyed, its very location physically erased from the landscape in a deliberate act specifically intended to eliminate any remaining trace that the community had ever existed.
A second Czech village, Lidice, suffered a strikingly similar fate only days later, again based on suspected and again largely unsubstantiated connections to resistance activity, with German forces executing the village's adult population and destroying the settlement entirely, adding a second erased community to the mounting civilian toll of Germany's retaliatory campaign.
Beyond these two infamous village destructions, the broader German retaliatory campaign across occupied Czechoslovakia resulted in the deaths of several thousand additional Czech civilians in the weeks and months following the assassination, through mass arrests, summary executions, and deportations to concentration camps, a human cost that dramatically exceeded, by orders of magnitude, the immediate practical impact of Heydrich's death itself, raising genuinely difficult, still debated historical and ethical questions regarding whether the symbolic and practical value of the assassination justified the catastrophic human cost its inevitable retaliation would predictably impose on the broader Czech civilian population. Meanwhile, Gabčík and Kubiš, along with several fellow resistance members who had assisted with various aspects of the operation, remained in hiding within the crypt of the Orthodox Cathedral in Prague, protected by sympathetic clergy who understood the enormous risk their assistance represented, but who nonetheless chose to provide sanctuary to the operatives responsible for Heydrich's death. This sanctuary ultimately proved temporary, as German authorities, following an intensive manhunt involving substantial financial rewards offered for information leading to the operative's capture, eventually received a tip from a Czech collaborator, a fellow resistance member who, under interrogation or the promise of reward, revealed the location where the operatives were hiding. On June 18, 1942, German security forces surrounded the Orthodox Cathedral, initiating a prolonged, intense firefight as the operatives, having sworn to resist capture rather than surrender, defended their position within the church and its underground crypt against overwhelming German forces for several hours. Despite being vastly outnumbered and facing German forces equipped with heavier weapons, and eventually attempts to flood the crypt in an effort to force the defenders out, the operatives continued resisting for an extended period, ultimately choosing to take their own lives rather than allow themselves to be captured alive, understanding both the inevitable brutal interrogation and execution that capture would bring, and the additional intelligence value their capture alive might provide German authorities regarding the broader resistance network that had supported the operation. The Orthodox clergy who had provided sanctuary to the operatives were subsequently arrested and executed by German authorities, alongside numerous additional members of the broader Czech resistance network, gradually identified and rounded up in the extended aftermath of the assassination and the cathedral siege, representing yet another significant wave of casualties directly attributable to the operation and Germany's response to it. In the years following the war's end, Operation Anthropoid has remained a subject of genuine, ongoing historical and ethical debate, precisely because of the stark, difficult tension between its clear practical and symbolic success in eliminating one of the Nazi regime's most dangerous and effective senior officials, and the catastrophic, wildly disproportionate civilian cost that Germany's retaliatory response ultimately imposed on the broader Czech population, a cost that dramatically exceeded, in terms of sheer human casualties, virtually any reasonable calculation of the assassination's direct military or strategic value. This tension reflects a genuinely difficult, unresolved historical question that continues to be debated by historians examining Operation Anthropoid and similar high-value assassination operations conducted against senior occupation officials throughout the broader European resistance movement during the war.
namely whether operations of this nature, however symbolically and practically valuable in the moment, could realistically be conducted without anticipating and, in some sense, accepting the near certainty of severe, disproportionate retaliation against civilian populations who bore no direct responsibility for the operation itself. A moral calculation that resistance planners in London and within occupied Czechoslovakia itself were forced to make under conditions of enormous uncertainty and incomplete information regarding exactly how severe German retaliation might ultimately prove to be.
Despite this genuinely difficult ethical legacy, Operation Anthropoid has also been remembered, particularly within Czech and Slovak national memory, as one of the most significant acts of active, organized resistance against Nazi occupation carried out by any European resistance movement during the entire war. A demonstration that occupied Czechoslovakia, despite the crushing weight of German administrative and military control, remained capable of striking directly at the highest levels of the Nazi occupation apparatus, successfully eliminating one of the regime's most feared and capable senior officials through a combination of careful planning, genuine personal courage, and, in the case of Kubish's grenade attack, succeeding to spike up Cheek's weapon jamming at the critical moment, a considerable degree of fortunate circumstance that ultimately allowed the mission to succeed despite this serious operational failure.
The villages of Lidice and Ležáky have since become permanent, powerful symbols of Nazi brutality and the devastating cost that occupied civilian populations across Europe frequently paid for resistance activity, whether their actual connection to specific resistance operations was genuine or, as in the case of these particular villages, largely fabricated or grossly exaggerated by German investigators seeking visible, dramatic targets for retaliatory action. Lidice, in particular, has been commemorated extensively in the decades since the war, including through a permanent memorial established at the site of the original village, and through numerous instances of communities in other countries choosing to rename streets, towns, or public spaces in honor of Lidice specifically as an act of international solidarity and remembrance, following the widespread publicity the village's destruction received once news of the atrocity reached the broader Allied world during the war itself. This has been Forgotten Frontlines. Every story we bring you is researched, written, and brought to life by the V-Team. Because some battles deserve to be remembered, no matter how strange, no matter how forgotten. If this story moved you, like this video, share it with someone who loves history, and subscribe for more forgotten stories from the front lines of the past. We'll see you in the next one.